1.0 Wuthering Waves feels like it's coming to an end for me, as I feel like I'm at the limit of what I can achieve and I'm kind of just waiting for union level experience at this point. So I thought I'd bring up some of the issues I've encountered with the game and try to come up with some solutions to the problems in hopes to start some discussion around what most players want to see fixed, improved, and added to the game. Also, for anyone who thinks me criticizing Wuthering Waves means I dislike the game and I must secretly hate it, I think it's actually really helpful to criticize things that you like as long as your criticism is constructive, valid, and based in reality. Now, before we start, I just want to state that the majority of my opinions will be more than likely related to combat, as that's the part of the game I'm enjoying the most. And as a Punishing Grey Raven player who started playing PGR at launch, I did quit for a while before picking it back up again when Chrome Glory was released and have been playing it ever since. I will also likely bring up some quality of life things Kuro should have kept from PGR. Hopefully most, if not all, of the major things I'm going to talk about are planned to be fixed or changed eventually, but I'm sure Kuro has their sights set on greater issues than the ones I'm having, so I'm willing to wait and see for now. First up, I don't think a lot of people will argue with me on this, but Wuthering Waves' biggest selling point is combat, boss fights, and challenges like Tactical Holograms, Tower of Adversity, and Depths of Elusive Realms. You could argue exploration is just as good, if not better, but the longevity of exploration is finite, combat is not, and will likely be what the vast majority of players stick around for each update. The other area that you could argue is more important is the characters, but my response to that would be, of course that's the case, it's a gacha. So because of that, in my opinion, any issues related to combat are going to feel way worse than any other issues with the game. And having said that, I think fixing the issues that combat has should be priority for Kuro games. I'll bring up a few issues, some of which I'm going to talk on more a little later. So first is damage going through a successful parry, or grab attacks you are meant to parry striking too fast for some characters to successfully parry. Second, while trying to dodge an attack, dodging into an object makes your character either climb or vault over it, which removes the dodge iframes and causes the attack you are trying to dodge to hit you. This isn't really a big issue, it's more just annoying. I wish they could fix it. Third, dodging out of an echo skill when on the ground has a chance to put your character in the air, causing you to perform an air dodge that can sometimes put you in really bad positions. Next is sometimes your ult and echo skill become unavailable for some reason, and I think it's related to what I'm about to say, but parries sometimes lock you out of being able to dodge. I notice this being a problem a lot if you parry Tempest's clone, but you still need to dodge an attack by Tempest. No matter how hard I mashed that button to dodge, the dodge never came. Next, this is mostly with Morning Aches, but some of the other bosses do it as well, and that is, some bosses can bug themselves in the air, making parries miss, and with Morning Aches' punish for missing grab parries, this is very frustrating. With the next one, I don't know if this is a controller only issue, but there are two bugs, one where you lose control of your dodge direction, and the other is losing control of the direction your character is moving. With some examples being if you're running and holding forward on the thumbstick while trying to close distance to an enemy and then dodge an attack, but instead of dodging forwards towards the direction you're moving, your character dodges backwards. And sometimes after a dodge, my character will get locked for a small period of time moving in only one direction, no matter the directional input, with the quickest way to fix this being to stop moving completely and then start moving again. Lastly, even though I'm not exactly sure how this works, but lag seems to play a role in the calculation of damage and when an attack hits. In a skill-based PvE game, all combat-related calculations should be done locally on your machine. However, this could be because Kuro wanted to put less stress on mobile devices, and if that is the case, perfectly understandable and it's an issue I'll just deal with. There are a lot more issues, but these are the ones I think should be fixed, as they make combat feel like it's very inconsistent and has a layer of RNG to it. Next, let's talk about echoes for a bit. Echoes and how they function in combat have a fair few bugs that are very irritating. The echoes I've used the most recently, and I say the most recently since Kuro could have hotfixed other echo bugs, so I'm not going to mention them just in case. But the Big Monkey and Thundering Mephis still have a few bugs that can feel frustrating to deal with. The most common between the two is dodging out of the echo skill can put you in the air like I talked about earlier. But also, the monkey has a chance to launch into the air at the start of its attack animation, completely missing enemies that aren't tall enough to hit. It can also just attack in the wrong direction completely, missing an enemy you're targeting, even if there's only one enemy. Although this does happen very rarely. And lastly, it can aim at another enemy that you aren't targeting, but to be fair, I imagine this is an issue with the game's targeting system in general. Next though, we'll talk about Thundering Mephis. Thundering Mephis has about a 70% success rate and a 30% failure rate even when there's only one target for the last attack to just whiff and attack nothing. This again though is more than likely an issue with the game's targeting system. And second, even if you lock onto one enemy, the attack in battles with multiple enemies will still be random, which I'm sure everyone who's played with Thundering Mephis has noticed, and will just teleport around the battlefield with seemingly no way to control it. This could be intended, and I imagine that it is, but if so, this is not a good precedent to set for future echoes. Echoes being a vital part of your character's kit should be a priority to get right. While on the topic of echoes though, let's talk about the gear system in the game. I get wanting to follow a gearing system of a successful game like Genshin or Star Rail, with the improvement on it being that you can farm them for free by going around the world and beating tacit discords. But with its current implementation, I'm left wondering why they deviated from PGR's memory system for the current echo system. In PGR, your gear or memories in that game felt more like a grind over time where you're trying to feed duplicate memories to re-roll the memory resonances, which are passives, abilities, or stat upgrades for your character. In PGR, the gearing feels way better to me as you can slowly build your gear over time and eventually get that end game build where every resonance is optimal, you've hyper-tuned your memories, and you can move on and start building the next character that you want to play without being worried about if you start building another character, you might miss out on getting that better gear piece for your favorite character. Once a character is built in PGR, that's it. More than likely, that's them done, with the only possible upgrade being getting additional copies of the character. It makes expanding your roster feel so much better and easier to catch up to current players, even if you started playing today, as you can typically build around 1 to 2 characters each patch, depending on your luck with getting the right passives on memories. Wuthering Waves currently threw that system out the window for one that has many more layers of RNG to it and no possible way to make bad pieces better over time. I can definitely understand players coming from Genshin and Star Rail saying gearing is way better, with some people even saying it's the best in any gacha out there, but compared to PGR, this is a massive downgrade in my opinion. PGR did it right, allowing you to build up power over time with a very achievable ceiling for each character, instead of having to wade through all the layers of RNG we now have in Wuthering Waves. I would like to see Kuro allow us to either use additional tuners or feed additional copies of the same grade echoes into our echoes to re-roll bad substats, or re-roll low rolls for a chance at getting a higher value one out of the same substat. Building power over time is always better than having to roll each piece from scratch, and if the piece is bad, that's it, it's bad. You might as well feed it to something else. It would also make it so that there's a very obvious and over time achievable ceiling for characters, making the bosses and future fights easier to balance against gear and power that endgame players should have access to. Lastly, on echoes, at the moment, unless you use a map or a planned farming route, tracking echoes in the open world has a few downsides that could be fixed or made a lot better. Right now, if I want to farm rose shrooms, which are the plant elite enemies, the game doesn't actually track all of them that I could have farmed around the world and leaves some of them out there that you either need to remember where they are or have marked down. If I'm tracking an enemy to farm for echoes, I don't understand the idea of not allowing me to track all of them, as the bottleneck for echoes is XP anyway. I want to see tracking track all of the desired echo and not just a percentage of them. Second, I would like to see the ability to track multiple different echoes at once. This could make it so that you're not revisiting the same location multiple times if you're wanting to farm multiple different echoes in one day. For example, if I wanted to farm herons, hoot chiefs, dreadmanes, rose shrooms, and tamarinus all in one day, having to track them all individually and revisit the same area multiple times has massive amounts of wasted time in it. That could be saved if you were able to track all the enemies that you wanted to farm and get directed to the next closest enemy in the area. It would cut down lost time from loading screens when having to teleport all around the map multiple times, and would allow players to have the game create a farming route for them instead of having to rely on a third-party map or the player's own memory. Next, I want to talk about bosses and their bugs. Right now, most of the bosses feel pretty good, but like with any game on launch, have a few bugs that I'd like to see ironed out. We'll mostly be talking about tactical holograms, since most of the overworld bosses don't really matter if a bug hits you, as they don't typically do enough damage to kill you. I'm not saying the bugs with these bosses don't matter, but they are a lot less relevant until they get their own challenge modes. In terms of tactical holograms, I think Heron is your entry-level hologram, then Monkey would be the next challenge, and last, Morning Aches and Tempest are both difficult, but for completely different reasons. Now, I can imagine people are pretty confused as to why I'm putting Morning Aches and Tempest on the same level, so let me explain my reasoning. Tempest is a really good boss with a lot of bugs at the moment, which we'll get into in a bit, that is meant to test your ability to parry and stay aware whilst also being a DPS check. I've also just recently beat the level 80 Mephis hologram solo, so if you're interested, keep an eye out for that video. But Mephis is definitely a hard fight that will test your abilities. But Morning Aches is a dog shit boss to fight, with its only saving grace being its low HP. It's riddled with bugs and delayed hits that will hit you after the animation, making the experience of fighting it really unenjoyable. I think the vast majority of players will come out of fighting Morning Aches thinking, thank fuck that's over. Now, if the bugs get fixed, I actually think it's a great fight. I like the idea of the player having to learn when and what they need to parry in harder challenges, as opposed to just having a visual parry now indicator. I honestly think the rest of the holograms should have certain attacks that do this. As much as I fought Mephis, I honestly don't know whether he has a fake parry or not, but there is an attack that I haven't been able to parry yet and just ended up dodging it in the end. Unfortunately for Morning Aches though, the fight has issues with it that feels like the game is kicking you in the balls for even attempting to do the fight right. One of the issues is it constantly glitches itself higher into the air and can get high enough that if a parry or grab attack is coming in, you might not be able to parry it even with perfect timing, since you can't connect with the boss's attack. And in that fight, if you don't parry the grab attacks, the boss will send out a triple homing blade barrage to punish you, with the blade barrage being very hit and miss depending on your positioning. Quick tip, the best way to deal with this attack is to be further away from the boss so that the blades come straight for your character, because the closer you are to the boss, the easier it is for the blades to miss you the first time and start spinning around your character, making them very hard to dodge. Another issue I've found relates to its dive bomb grab attack being really hard to parry for certain characters. I'm going to use Jian for my example, as he's the character I've used the most that this has happened on. Now, for disclosure, I've also fought this boss on both Calcharo and Yinlin solo, and both of those characters feel infinitely better to parry with than Jian does. For Jian, I only found 2 reliable strategies that would parry the dive bomb grab attack 100% of the time, unless the boss did what I talked about earlier and flew over the top of my character, but that doesn't count. And those tactics were to be in or use your ult, as Jian's ult state is very similar to Chrome Glory from PGR, with it essentially being an auto parry for the vast majority of attacks in the game. The only other method that I found was to set up his basic attack 3 and dodge at the same time. Every single time I did this and the boss didn't bug out and fly over the top of me, I would successfully parry. If I didn't dodge, it was about a 70% chance that the grab would just go straight through my attack. I never tested this, but you might also be able to pull off the same strategy I'm using with attacking and dodging at the same time, but with his resonance skill instead. But I'm very much like, once I find a method that works reliably, I stick with it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Morning Aches' dive bomb grab isn't the only instance I've encountered of a parry failing or essentially failing. There is still the issue of some successful parried attacks still allowing the damage from the attack to hit your character anyway. I've only noticed this happening on Heron, Tempest Mephis, and Inferno Rider so far, but I'm sure it happens on more bosses. What I believe is happening is if the boss's attack hitbox touches your character's hitbox in the same frame the parry if statement is processed, then the parry will be successful, but you'll still get hit. For anyone who doesn't know what an if statement is, it's used in programming to determine what should happen when a variable is true or false. For example, if parry is successful, then stop the attack and stagger the boss, else continue the attack. It feels really unrewarding to try and line up a combo to parry an attack, have the parry be successful, but then take the damage from the attack anyway. At the end of the day, I have no idea exactly what's going wrong here. All I know is there is something wrong, and I hope Kuro can find and fix the problem. Last point on bosses, I'm going to say something that's probably going to make people think I'm crazy, but the tactical hologram Tempest Mephis isn't hard. Well, it is hard, it's just not crazy hard like people are making it out to be. It's a very technical fight that you're supposed to learn when you can parry, what you can parry, when you should strike, and what you need to dodge. Other than that, the fight is pretty straightforward. The clone can throw a curveball every now and then, but it's typically not something that you can't deal with. The reason it feels hard, in my opinion, is on top of being a technical fight, it's also riddled with bugs. And the thing is, you might not even notice the amount of bugs this fight has unless you're doing something like what I'm doing and you're trying to clear it solo. So I really want to talk about two of the major bugs that I've encountered with Mephis. Now, I should preface this by saying I've only fought this boss with Jian and the level 45 version of the boss with Dan Jin, as my only other two built characters are Kalcharo and Yinlin, both of which would be shit against Mephis. I'm currently building up Danjin, but she's only level 40 something at the moment and her echoes are only half leveled. So the first issue I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you parry the clone's attack, the game will lock you out of being able to use your ultimate, being able to use your echo skill, but most importantly, being able to dodge. This is alone a massive issue with the fight, as if you parry the clone's attack but still need to dodge one of Mephis's attacks, you can't unless you do something like switch characters, and with me doing the fight solo, I can't do that. The first night I tried to solo level 80 Mephis, I nearly got a clear only to get one shot by his ultimate move because I couldn't dodge at all after parrying the clone. Like I mentioned before, if you do have the option to switch to other characters, you can avoid this, but if you don't because you're trying to solo it, that is a potential run ender right there. The other major issue I've found is Tempest's model goes invisible for a period of time after recovering from being down, making it nearly impossible to tell what attack he's doing, and if it's a fast attack, it's typically already too late when you find out. There are other issues such as dodging an attack successfully, then getting hit by the damage anyway, but this happens on a lot of other bosses, so I'm not going to assign this only to Mephis. And there's also a very, very low chance that you get the parry bug, which if you've ever had it, you'll know that's basically just restart and try again. There are very few ways to deal with the parry bug. The only time I successfully beat it was when I altered the clone. Over time, I imagine all of the issues with bosses will be ironed out, but the issues that I've mentioned in this video, in my opinion, should be priority number one. I'm going to add these next talking points at the end since they're not really an issue or a bug in any sense. It's more just what I want to see in the future at some point. And the first one is replayable story quests and cutscenes. The reason I want to see this in game is right now there are a lot of issues with the story that Kuro has said they're going to fix or change, and I'm looking forward to seeing those changes, but unless there's an option to replay the quests or somehow just rewatch the cutscenes, I would have to start a new account just to see the changes, which I really don't want to do. I've always liked games like Honkai Impact and PGR that allow you to re-watch cutscenes or re-fight a boss in the story anytime that you want. So I would like to see something like this in Wuthering Waves in the future. Do I think people will agree with me on this? No, I don't think people would want to see this in game for the simple fact that Wuthering Waves already has so much to do in it every day that the vast majority of people will think that it's just a feature I'll never use, since if I have time to play the game, replaying old content that you've already done before for no reward would feel like a waste of time. Now, Kuro have mentioned recently in the past few days that they're going to allow players to reread or re-listen to dialogue from the story, but this is only audio, so I would really like them to take this to the next step in future and allow rewatching cutscenes and maybe even replaying whole quests. Next thing I would like to see is upgrade material information for character upgrades. I always like that in Genshin and Star Rail, you can see the materials required to upgrade all of your character's ascension levels. The single pull rewards that you get in those two games from that system would be a bonus, but I would only like to see that too because of player expectations. If they were to add this feature to the game, it would be better to have the pull rewards for certain ascension levels to just avoid any drama or pissing off community members who have certain expectations. Having said that, the thing that I care about is only the upgrade information being readily accessible in-game. If I had it my way, I would not only want to see this in-game for characters, but also weapons and talent tree upgrades. I want to see all of the materials required for anything that's upgradable. Next, I want to talk about how they should make dailies more streamlined. Star Rail does a hell of a lot of things right in my opinion, and one of the things they do right is making dailies really easy to complete if you just play the game. In my opinion, I shouldn't have to go out of my way to do an activity I didn't already plan to do today just to complete the daily quest for rewards. I think everyone would rather passively complete the dailies over the course of half an hour by doing the things they were already planning on doing anyway. If I wasn't planning to kill a Calamity class enemy one day, and instead I wanted to focus on running around farming echoes and doing forgery challenges to use up my wave plates before logging off, going to kill that boss feels like I'm wasting my time. Now I can understand people look at me complaining about having to go out of my way for a minute to 2 minutes tops as a bit of an irrational whine, but I'm comparing the experience that Star Rail gives me to complete dailies versus Wuthering Waves experience, and Star Rail is easily the winner. As small of a waste of time it is, it's still time I would rather be spending doing any of the other things that I actually want to do. So don't get rid of any of the current daily missions. Just add more missions each day that cover more areas of the game so players can complete quests by just playing the way they want. It's simply a respect for players' time in my opinion. Now, after I recorded this, it turns out they've already addressed this as something that will be added in 1.1, so I'm looking forward to seeing how much better the system is next update. Next, I want to talk about Echo data merging. At the moment, it's insanely slow to feed all of the useless trash echoes you've accumulated over time, and instead of being only 5 at a time, should allow you to feed echoes in bulk, let's say 50 at a time. But you should also be able to limit what echoes with what main stats are okay to feed, so you don't accidentally feed a good piece you might not have known you had and would have wanted to keep. I imagine most people just lock all of the echoes that they want to keep, but there's no harm in adding a system to help protect players from losing potentially really good echoes. Last thing I want to talk about is server or global leaderboards, specifically for hard challenge modes like tactical holograms. Yes, I know I am a broken record and I will be talking about leaderboards all the way up until they're added. And you want to know the really funny thing about me harboring on about them? Is they wouldn't even be for me. They would be for the most competitive, hardcore players in the community to challenge and compete against each other. Having leaderboards for some main categories, like the basic category being fastest time, and then you could also have more restrictive categories like no hit or solo, or even more restrictive categories like 4-star only or S0 only. Now let's be honest, they would never add S0 only, but the rest of the categories, I can absolutely see them getting added. Having leaderboards in the game for really hard challenges would appeal to a lot of players' competitive nature, giving these challenges a lot more longevity as we head into the future of Wuthering Waves. The only issue I can see with global leaderboards is if Wuthering Waves starts to suffer from some form of hacking or cheating. Not only is no one going to respect your score on its own with no evidence of completion if it could have just been cheated, but there's also a lot less competitive desire for the majority of players if people's accomplishments could just be overshadowed or overwritten by hackers. Having said all that, I still really like the idea of leaderboards for the game. PGR has them for some of their activities like Warzone and Pain Cage, so it'd be really great to see Kuro Games add them into Wuthering Waves for tactical holograms or other challenge modes they might come out with in future. And that's it. That's the last thing I wanted to talk about. So if you enjoyed the video, you can let me know with that like button. And also, if you want to talk about how I'm right or wrong, or you just have your own ideas, let me know down in the comments. I can't promise I'll agree with you, but I can always respect other people's point of view and I enjoy reading them. But for now, let's just all keep looking forward to 1.1. I'm really looking forward to seeing the next two characters' animations and playstyles, and also getting to explore the next zone. Hopefully we also get a new tactical hologram. Personally, I'd love to see Inferno Rider or Crownless get one. They're both really cool bosses who, in my opinion, deserve to get their own challenge modes. So until next time, YouTube, I'll catch you later.